Welcome to Evilive, the live media commentary show that answers the question, how long does your spoon actually have to be to sup with the devil? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we are reviewing Season 2 of FX and Hulu's Reservation Dogs. Now, Season 1, I didn't have this show, so I couldn't talk about it. I talked about it with my friends because it was goddamn amazing. But Season 2 amped it up. Not only did they get 2 extra episodes, they took it in a completely just sort of wild, random places. But if you've never heard of Reservation Dogs, if you don't know anything about this show, you should probably stab yourself in the foot or something, because this is an amazing series that, I mean, there's nothing quite like it. It makes you laugh. It makes you cry, literally. It makes you feel love and frustration. It's an amazing show. All right, so let's talk about the show, and then I'll sort of just riff a little bit over the second season, highlights what I think about it and stuff. So this is created by Sterlin, Harjo, and Taika Waititi. It was completely filmed in Oklahoma. The series follows the lives of 4 Indigenous teenagers in rural Oklahoma as they spend their days committing crime and fighting it. After the death of their friend Daniel, 1 year prior to the events of the series, the gang wrestles with the desire to move to California the way that Daniel dreamed of. But first, they need to tie up loose ends in their lives and community and make preparations to leave. In Season 2, the Res Dogs are still experiencing grief over the loss of their friend, now compounded by the foursome being broken apart and scattered and missing each other. The California dream does not turn out the way they expected, resulting in, well, more feelings of disappointment and abandonment. While they cope using humor, they also face increasingly more adult challenges. Financially and family responsibilities arise, and they continue to try to figure out their lives. What you really get out of this series is that complex time in a teenager's life when they are learning what it means to be an adult. And coming to terms with that can be very frustrating for anyone. I mean, you don't know how you're going to make a living. You don't know where you're going to get your money from. You don't know what other responsibilities that are ultimately going to be thrown down on your shoulders because you're an adult. But as a child, you're never really exposed to them. So it all comes as a shock and surprise. And couple all of that with the idea of growing apart from your friends and still trying to wrestle with the loss of your friends. I dealt with losing a friend in high school, and so maybe that's why I am really connecting with this group of friends. I mean, I have to think that that's the reason why. I have no other. I have no Indigenous peoples in my blood. I have no connection to reservations or to Native culture, but it is wildly fascinating to me how they not only celebrate Indigenous cultures and reservation life, but they also point out where it fails those who live in those communities. And so it's an honest, real take without being a documentary or without really trying to drive home some social political agenda. It's just presenting these are characters in this environment that is the real world, and this is how they're dealing with it. And so it feels genuine. It feels real. Every win and loss that they suffer feels earned and realistic. So it stars Devery Jacobs as Elora Danan Pastoak. I'm going to mess up some of these names, and I do apologize. Woon-A-Tai as Bear Smallhill. Lane Factor as Chester Cheese Williams. Paulina Alexis as Wilhelmina Willie Jack Jacqueline. And those are the main 4. And of course you have Daniel, who comes in flashbacks primarily, but he never really interacts. And this is the other side of it that I really like about that, is that, you know, they're talking about a friend who, I mean, literally killed himself. And so let's, oh, fuck, man, this hit me hard just for a second. In absence of a suicide note, and sometimes even when there is one, there's always this vacuum of understanding and this desire to you don't really get to ask questions anymore because they're gone, right? Sorry, it's just hitting me. You don't really understand why they would go through that when you know, and all their other friends are still here and willing to sort of walk through that despair with them. And to see this affected in these kids' lives, you can't help but feel for it, you know, especially if you've experienced it in your past as well. So it's not just a sad story, though at times it is. It's about how they don't understand what their friend was going through to cause the final outcome that was caused. It's also about them trying to maintain the connection that the absence of their friend helped glue them to each other. Like, you have this sort of sense of a gang, a group of friends, and you take one of them out of the equation and suddenly the chemistry is off. It feels a little bit different. And so they're wrestling with what that means. And then just experiencing life on the reservation and being torn apart by meeting new friends and not understanding how you could be friends with what used to be an antagonist of some sort to your little group. And meeting the wildly interesting characters that are also populating this reservation and the culture that this reservation creates. You really get a sense of place and well, you know, to be quite honest about how reservations are failed by the government. And I understand that, you know, the government set aside land in order to allow the native peoples to sort of run their own lives. And you know, it's a sad sort of prize for, you know, them losing everything. And the U.S. government's like, well, we'll give you these little areas that we don't want for one reason or another so that you can live in. Even if it was never a part of their original tribal lands in the first place, well, now this is where we say you're from. You're going to live in this containment. And then the truth about it is, you know, when they would subsidize them with food and medicine, it was less than stellar in most of the history of its supplying. It would be rancid meat. They would force sterilize the women. They would indoctrinate the kids and make them cut their hair and wear white culture clothes instead of their indigenous people's clothes. There is nothing but a history of violence and sorrow and injustice when it comes to Native culture in the Americas. And to see a show put a spotlight on it, but not even address any of that, just address the people who are living in this particular reservation, just focusing on them and the characters they are and the struggles that they really have in their lives and what it means if you leave and you have a life outside of the reservation, then you come back, how the people who stayed now see you in a different light, how they all champion Native peoples rising up in pop culture, seen as Bear's father is this rapper, except that he's an absent father. He has no participation in his life. And then they wrap in spirituality in a very interesting way, where Bear starts to see in the first season, and he sees it in the beginning of the second season, one of his spirit ancestors, who's actually really fucking funny, tells jokes most of the time, and doesn't even really have any wisdom to impart, but somehow something is gleaned from the nonsensical, commentary that this native fucking spirit is delivering. And then there's the heartfelt spiritual moments where, for example, Willie Jack goes to jail in this season to talk to what she used to consider, I think it's an aunt, but she used to consider her like a mother figure who, again, now is in jail, because she just wants to sort of get advice about how to deal with the loss of her friend Daniel, and how at the beginning of the school year, they all had to write a letter about what they wanted, out of life by the end of the school year. And he had written his, but then he killed himself in the interim. And so now that it's at the end of the school year, they're handing the letters back so they can sort of get a little bit of perspective about where they were and where they are. And so the teacher gave her Daniel's. And so this whole friend group she doesn't know what to do with this letter. And so she goes to Daniel's mom, and who's in prison. And she's like, I got this letter. I want to read it with you. I want to read it to my friends, but I don't really know how to do it. I don't know what to do. And, she has this insane spiritual moment that was beautiful. This show, I don't know what it is. It hits me really hard, and it's so heartwarming and potent in all of the emotions that it forces you to have in the best of ways. So the series originally premiered on Hulu under FX Hulu branding on August 9th, 2021, on International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. On September 2021, the series was renewed for a second season, which premiered August 3rd, 2022. In September 2022, just this month, the series was renewed for a third season. So the first season was 8 episodes. They didn't really know if it would be accepted or even watched, for that matter. But it was, and people love it, including this one. And the second season got extra 2 episodes, so now it's a 10 season. And they just sort of went wild with it. They're like, we're going to continue that story that we were telling with these 4, but we're also going to spin off to what their parents are doing, what other reservation community leaders are doing. The idea of native influencers coming in to talk to the youth in this sort of I don't know, like a YMCA sort of environment. It was like the whole thing is just really entertaining. You see drug culture intermixed with community action, and then just celebrating together, whether that's the sorrow of a grandmother dying in Elora Danan's particular case, or whether it's committing literal crimes and trying to cover them up or get away with them, and realizing that the other adults in this community were looking after these little would-be criminals because there's already been enough sorrow in this community that just because you make one mistake doesn't mean you should live the rest of your life in prison. And I just love everything I'm going to say it over and over again, but I love everything about this series and how it makes you feel and the messages that it imparts. There's one really wonderful episode that's focused on Cheese's character where he happens to be at his uncle's house, who then gets arrested for growing pot in his home. And so they put Cheese in a home, like a halfway house or a foster home. He's not of age, and so he has to, sort of just like any kid without a parent, you have to live in these homes until your parents get out. We get to see him interact with these other troubled youth, and he is a very progressive young man who, arguably, and this makes me sound old because I'm, 2 generations removed from the current generation that's out there right now. But the way that it approaches the modern view of culture, whether it's dealing with pronouns or whether it's dealing with gender identity, sexuality, it was a very different way of seeing it when I was coming up at their age, and to see it through their eyes now in a non-confrontational, socially stigma surrounding way of like hammering it into someone's head, it just presents this it sounds so stupid because I just feel so old. This modern way of looking at gender and identity. And it's not even like hammering. It's not even like trying to teach you anything. It's just him expressing himself to other people and them then trying to understand where he's coming from. And it's just very mild, lighthearted, but it resonates with our current culture. It's just a way of presenting information without hitting you in the head with it. And I was so much more receptive to, first of all, I'm a progressive, social progressive anyway. So I'm, identify however you want. I don't give a fuck. But I'm a fucking heteronormative fucking dude. Like that's just, so it's like, I shouldn't even really be involved in the conversation. But it was just very, I don't know. It made me feel good the way they approached the entire subject without actually approaching it. And that's, in the same way that, we're talking about the atrocities of the U.S. government on Native peoples, the political and social side of woke culture, and how it's being reacted to by individuals, it can be very off-putting. And so addressing it without actually addressing it is arguably the best way to even approach it. And it's not even really addressing it. It's just acknowledging that, yes, it exists, and this is how I see the world, and this is how I see me. It's nice to meet you. How do you see you? Sort of thing. Anyway, I really dug it. All right, so this thing has gotten awards, and here's just a couple of them here. Widespread critical acclaim with a number of accolades: a Peabody Award, 2 Independent Spirit Awards, Critics' Choice Television Awards, Golden Globe, one of the best series of 2021 by critics. American Film Institute named it one of the 10 best programs in 2021, and arguably that's going to be in 2022 too, because this season is so much better than the first, and the first already knocked it out of the park. There's a moment I was on something that me and my buddies call a man camp, where we just take a weekend and go camping. And I was like standing on top of this mountain with, petroglyphs and Dinosaur National Monument in Utah, and just looking across at this wonderful scene, standing there. And my buddy, who also watches this, you've seen him on this channel, was like sitting back behind me, and he started referencing the series. There's this moment where these elders are trying to teach the kids a ritual, and they start singing a Tom Petty song as like a closing of the ritual, because they couldn't really figure out any other way to close it out. And they're referencing it as this really old, song. And it's just like, she's a good girl, loves her mama, And so like, he starts singing that as I'm staring off, and I immediately jump in and start singing it too. And we have this wonderful connection of understanding exactly why he's singing it, how it's applicable to this really sort of weird moment that we found ourselves in. And I don't know, it makes this wonderful connection with people who have also seen and also genuinely love this truly masterful TV series in a completely out of context location in the middle of nowhere on a mountain overlooking this beautiful valley. But it was just the right moment for just that action and calling back to this amazing series. I absolutely loved it. One of my favorite parts of this entire season was the last episode, when they finally decide as a group to go out to California, go to the ocean like Daniel always wanted to. And they do. And they have misadventures and mishaps along the way, and trouble finds them, of course, because life happens. But that moment when they're at the very end, they're sort of like wrapping each other's arms around each other and just sort of in like a little huddle circle, and they see their friend there with them. Oh, devastating, but absolutely beautiful. And it was just the most brilliant possible way of ending what ultimately is a 2-season story arc. Seeing it at the very first season, you were just shocked by the horror of suicide. Seeing it at the end of the second season, the unification of the friends and letting go of the pain, but still being able to remember and celebrate their friend, it was beautiful. Absolutely stunning. So, sorry about that. So anyway, I hope you guys check this out. Give it a shot if you haven't already. And I'm going to give this, I haven't updated this, so it says 3 evil eyes. I'm going to change that. It is 5 evil eyes. This is an amazing series and show. It's on Hulu. It's produced by FX Productions. And basically anything Taika Waititi does is pretty much masterful. So I really appreciate that as well. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. Definitely check out Reservation Dogs. And as always, remember that evil spelled backwards is live. So get your asses out there and fucking be evil.